Get ready. You're listening to Give God 90 live.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Almost me. There we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Give God 90. We are live. Some of us are actually here, believe it or not. My name is Jerry Mitchell. Sitting beside me is my lovely, talented, and exhausted Myra.
Hello.
She's been trying to get things arranged here. It's just been one of those kind of weird weeks, and I'll get to more of that in a second. Let me welcome everyone for all of the folks who are joining us now or will be joining us. We've got quite a few additional people coming to us all the time, listening on the podcast because we're in so many different places. We
Hi,
certainly
Pam.
appreciate that. Hi, Pam. On Facebook, and we appreciate that. So I kind of like to go through a little bit about where we are, who we are, what we're doing as we begin, give people a chance to tune in that are going to be joining us live. Don't forget the website, givegod90.com, givegod90.com. Check us out. You'll see what we're all about. There's links to the books that are there, Tradition to Truth, and God's Universe, God's Rules. Don't forget, we're also on YouTube, Facebook, Spreaker, your favorite podcast, which takes us to your favorite podcast outlet all over the world. And we thankfully have people that do listen from all over the world. I get messages from strange places sometimes. So, and we enjoy it.
We do.
It's a lot of fun. I kind of like having people contact us and say, hey, heard what you said. Thank you for doing this. When Pam joined us, we had a lot of, I didn't realize I had quite as many people from Israel as listened to this, but there are. And I had some of those folks say how happy they were that Pam was able to come on and share about the trip she had. So, of course, she went to the real Mount Sinai in Saudi Arabia.
Yes.
I hate to say this next part. I really do. We shared with you last week the news about Myra's father and him dealing with lymphoma and all of that. Because of that, in our family, you don't do anything by yourself. It's all or nothing, right?
Right.
So because of that, we've got things going on. There may be some times we need to interrupt, not do a Thursday night, maybe not do a Monday night.
Right.
There may be times when I don't have the opportunity to put something out that I usually put out every day. I like to here for the last several weeks, it's been something from the Psalms that have been going out. And a lot of people look forward to that. A lot of people say how much they like it. We really appreciate it. I just want you to know it's not because we're going anywhere. It's just we're dealing with stuff.
Right.
So as we deal with stuff, trying to sort out what's going on, who's doing what, who's going where, what's happening.
And the added family coming in and being around and...
Oh, you went there. Okay.
Oh, sorry.
I thought it was a surprise, but okay. You never know who's listening. So anyway, with all of that going on, there may be some times we see some interruptions. So just don't take it personal, but continue to pray and make sure that we're covered that way. Just because we need it. He needs it. I know he'd appreciate all the prayers he can get. So, I don't like having to be that way because I like to treat this like people are out there depending on me for some strange reason. Because some of them do. They enjoy what we put out, and I like to be there for folks. So, we try. We try very hard, but it's not always. It doesn't always get to be that way. So, hopefully, we can keep it as close to normal as possible. When I was looking at what I wanted to title today's show, what should you believe? I thought about the old joke where the student goes into a philosophy class and the professor says, "Okay, class, welcome to class. I'm going to teach you how to think." And one of the students was raised similar to what I was raised, and he stood up and started to walk out. And the professor said, "Where are you going?" And the student looks at him and said, "Well, I don't need anybody to tell me how to think." Because, that's me. I don't need people to tell me how to think, right? The professor says, "No, you don't understand. I'm going to teach you the process of thought. The conclusion that you come to at the end of process of thought is what to think. You draw that on your own. I'm just teaching you the process to get there." So that's kind of where I was at with that. So what should you believe is the question. And the answer, well, is pretty simple, right? For people who know what we put out, you believe what God says.
That's it.
So that, okay, that's all we got. But let me show you how we get there, okay? Stick with me for a few minutes. We'll show you how we get to that conclusion. And believe it or not, it's not always as easy, especially in today's world, because today's world we have things going on where it's confusing, isn't it? There's confusing theories, there's competing theories, there's all these strange things that are happening. With everything we've witnessed over the past several months, dealing with coronavirus all over the world, not just in the United States, there's been some confusing recommendations from scientists and doctors and politicians and news journalists, right? All of these things that kind of blend together, and you don't know what you should do. You don't know how you should think about this. What's the process you should use? Well, they really don't know quite often. They have working theories. They have this and they have that, and people are asking them questions, and sometimes they talk when they shouldn't. Well, who doesn't? But you know what I mean, right? One week they say, well, this virus is easily transmitted if you touch something, and then you do something, you can catch it, right?
Right.
And then they said, oh, no, wait, we were wrong. And now we're back to, well, maybe. But grocery stuff in the grocery store, that's safe. Apparently stuff in other types of stores is safe, but some stores, it isn't safe. You know what? You understand the confusion. Okay? I think everybody understands the confusion. One day we're on the verge of finding a vaccine. The next day it's like, this virus disappears so quickly just on its own that we don't have time to deal with it. We don't know what to look for. I'm not sure quite how that works. Media is not helping any either. When the media...
And yet they can test you for antibodies.
Yeah, isn't that amazing?
Like, what?
Well, biology's biology. If you catch a cold, you're going to test positive for that cold virus, which is a coronavirus, by the way. But the thing is, you're going to have the antibodies. Hey, Rob's watching. You're going to have
Hi, Rob.
You're going to have the antibodies that say, okay, you're good. Now, the thing is, with the media is not really helping the situation because, let's face it, the media has to sell advertising. That's where they make their money. The only way they can compete is to be overbearing, is a good word. They will exploit any little thing they can get their hands on to make you tune in to that particular show, or make you listen to that particular thing, or make you read this or go here. And that's how they say, look, we've got so many people watching. You can now depend on us to guarantee your advertising sales reaching X number of people at this particular time. That's how marketing is done. It's the nature of the beast. Not really a really good way to say that in a biblical context, is it? But it really is. because that is the way it is, these newscasters, these journalists ask, everybody wants to ask the most brilliant question in the world until they get in front of somebody, and what they say comes out quite often to be the silliest thing they can ask. It's like, well, I won't even get into it because I got a lot further, more important things to deal with. But just not everything you're going to see on any given news media is real. Well, I shouldn't say it's not. They do this stuff, but it's done to get you, to draw you in to watch their show so that they can sell numbers for advertising to get paid. I don't think all of them are bad. I don't think all of them are good. Some of them are better than others. I will say this about them. I knew enough radio personalities throughout the years that local radio is typically going to be your better source of information. Because local radio personalities, whether they're conservative, whether they're liberal, whether they're for somebody or against somebody else, you know what you're listening to. And they don't sit around and have somebody else writing their talking points. They might get them from other places, but typically they're not going to sit around thinking dumb stuff up to get you.
Right.
Because most radio personalities host call-in talk shows at some point during their show, right?
Right.
Well, it's really hard to script that. Years ago, there was a very famous one close to where we live, and he would have people. He built his entire thing being smart enough. Okay, he had a very quick memory. He had a very good memory, a very quick comeback, and he built his audience because he was able to converse with them at their level.
Right.
Now, if you'll watch the national shows, they might have 3 or 4 or 5 people call in, but people aren't listening to a national host because they want to hear the callers. They want to hear what the host has to say. And that's the difference. That's the big difference. The host has to be the one at that point to decide what he's going to talk about, and he drives the show.
Right.
Local radio, small time, I hate to say small time, but smaller time radio, they're the ones that depend on their listeners to drive the show. So that's the difference there. Even your local TV news, depending on what they're affiliated with, that's where they will get their written news. And then the guy sitting there on the newscast with a fancy cheap suit, I shouldn't have said that, because they don't, years ago, there were clothing outlets that used to tailor suits for men and dresses for women. And at the end of the show, you would see, so-and-so's clothes provided by, right? That was their advertising. Now they have to, many of them, buy their own. And it shows. I buy my own, okay? It shows, right? For those folks on the
Comfy
podcast
clothes.
only, trust me, it's
We dress decent.
we dress nice.
Yes.
Sometimes it's, well, this one happens to be an actual store. Sometimes it came from the real store. Sometimes it's thrift store. Trust me. Trust me. Thrift stores are our friends. But here's the thing. People like to confuse facts sometimes to get certain points across, certain agendas driven. The folks responsible for keeping track of statistics sometimes, they work for companies who are supposed to be reputable auditing firms. But how do you say, you should really come to my company because we can, it's hard to advertise an auditing firm because, hey, there's Deb. I bet Daryl's there too.
Oh, look. Hey, Francisco.
And
Hi, Deb. Hi, Daryl.
And, it's really hard for an auditing company to say, use our company and we'll manipulate these numbers any way you want to manipulate them. Because that's possible. It's possible. You can, numbers are abstract things. And 3 doesn't always have to represent 3. Okay, you can have 3 groups right? I'll get into that another time. But you can have all these weird things. So countries have been counting their COVID statistics kind of strange. Some countries have really high, really extreme COVID numbers. Other countries are just kind of, we've got a few. I think it was Venezuela this week. Their total COVID numbers for the people of Venezuela, which is like 30 million people, were 10. 10 people suffered from COVID virus in Venezuela. Apparently, having a socialist dictator worked for them. Or
Maybe they
They're
actually
not-
claimed the proper numbers.
they could have claimed the proper numbers. They might not be counting things the way we're counting things. I see there's Daryl. So it's all
Hi, Daryl.
in these things. We see it, we look at it, and say, oh, that's kind of odd that some countries have high numbers, some countries have low numbers. In the United States, some states have extreme numbers, some states have very low numbers, right? It's all the way in the way they count them. I saw on the news, or a news agency, I should say, today, the state of Washington is now being, they've got some problems because they were counting gunshot victims as COVID victims, okay?
Oh,
That
that's
was...
not going to be good.
No good can come from that. Then you have politicians. Oh, you got to love the politicians, and I'm going to pick on a couple. New York and California, 3,000 miles apart. In one state, it's perfectly okay. You can go swimming, you can go surfing, you can sunbathe on the beach. It's good. But in another state, nope, you can't go swimming, you can't go surfing, but you can walk on the beach and you can exercise. And both states claim that their policies are based on scientific research. Scientific research comes up with two completely, almost contradicting ideas. So what are we supposed to believe? What should we be believing? Well, let's look at something different completely. Let's leave the COVID world. Let's leave that kind of thing for a minute. And let's look at something else. You know, there are some religious denominations that, I like that comment, Deb. Thank you very much. She says, what I said about manipulating numbers is absolutely correct. Yeah, I've seen the way it's done. It's not pretty. I took statistics in school. I know how to do it. There are some religious denominations that will try to convince you that Satan is in complete control of this world. They do. That's their belief. That's their denominational doctrine. Others, they promote, well, God has left us to our own devices. He got tired of us and he's no longer involved with us. We have to do, what we think's good. There's another denomination that says, it doesn't matter who you are, what you believe, it's right. Now, if that doesn't sound like each man was doing what was right in his own eyes, that's somewhere in the Bible, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. Just want to make sure.
It is.
Just want to make sure. Some people claim that heaven's this far off place and, it's just always going to be so far away. And there are other theories, other doctrines that say, nope, it's here, but it's not reachable from this body. And that's kind of what I'm leaning at. It's always going to be just out of reach. Wherever your fingertips can reach, it's just on the other side, because flesh and blood cannot enter the kingdom of heaven, right? Mm-hmm. How many times have we said that, even right here? There are some that claim that their dead ancestors are watching, they're looking down on them, making sure everything's okay. That's their guardian angel. There's others that say, no. My ancestors are floating around on a cloud playing a harp. No, my loved ones that have passed away, they're doing this or doing that, doing something else. What are we supposed to believe? What is real? What is true? There's a funny word I'm going to use as I talk about all this. It's called science. In 1828, Noah Webster defines science. And he says it's from the Latin word, scios or scio, meaning to know. And his definition was, and this is in 1828, and I laughed when I read this, I really did. In a general sense, knowledge or certain knowledge, the comprehension or understanding of truth and facts by the mind. The science of God must be perfect.
Wow, that's intense.
Isn't it? Now, why did I laugh when I read that? How many scientists, in air quotes, how many secular scientists out there are going to say, you know what? You need to leave God out of science because that is fictitious religious fantasy, right? Webster is saying that we find our Creator in science and through science. What he's saying is that if you watch what's going on in the world, just like it says in Job, ask the earth and it will tell you, ask the animals, they will show you. That's science. Observable, repeatable results that are the same every time. That's science. But secular scientists say, no, that's religious, fictitious fantasy. I understand their confusion. I really do. The secular world, I get where they're coming from. And this is going to sound funny. But based on the doctrines of all the almost 43,000 different denominations, they don't conform to the Bible. Not all of them do. They have their own traditions. They have their own doctrine. They go their own way. Each one does what is right in his own eyes. Oh, I said that a minute ago, right? Ooh. And the church is really largely to blame for the confusion among the scientific community because of the inclusion of all the traditions and the doctrines that are not confirmed by Scripture. I think it was in God's Universe, God's Rules that I wrote, we must hold our ideas, our theories, and our concepts up to Scripture. Because if we try to hold Scripture up to what we think is right, we have ultimately replaced God with us. We have to hold our theories up to Scripture. Because that way, God is above us. If we try to hold what is in Scripture up to what we think, it's going to fail every time because we want to insert certain things, don't we? When somebody makes a remark like, it's not really in the Bible, but I believe, you're basing your belief either on tradition, you might be basing your belief, believe it or not, on some form of pagan worship, fictional fantasy, or worse yet, your own desire. And all of those things are condemned by Scripture. 2 Samuel. David is going through, he's praising his Creator in chapter 7, verse 28. And he says, so now, Jehovah, my Lord, you alone are God, and your words are truth, and you have promised your servant a good thing. How do we know what to believe? How do we know what we should believe? David tells us over and over and over again, and I only went to David because he does it most often, and he probably does it more well known than any other of the biblical writers, that the Almighty's words are truth. In Psalm 119, I'm going back to Psalm 119. I use this a lot just because it does deal with us. In verses 150 through 160, would you like to read those?
Those who pursue evil plans come near. They are far from your instructions. You are near, Lord, and all your commands are true. Long ago I learned from your decrees that you have established them forever. Consider my afflictions and rescue me, for I have not forgotten your instructions. Defend my cause and redeem me. Give me life as you promised. Salvation is far from the wicked because they do not seek your statutes. Your compassions are many, Lord. Give me life according to your judgments. My persecutors and foes are many. I have not turned from your decrees. I have seen the disloyal and feel disgust because they do not keep your word. Consider how I love your precepts, Lord. Give me life according to your faithful love. The entirety of your word is truth, and all your righteous judgments endure forever.
The entirety of your word is truth. What should you believe? If you can't believe the Almighty, why would you believe anybody? Of course, Psalm 119, David's proclaiming the great words of God, the Creator, and he says it's true. He says it over and over and over again. But before David, Moses standing at the burning bush. Can you imagine this? Now, Moses is reluctant. This is a job interview. God has chosen him, and he's interviewing Moses. And Moses, in Exodus 4, finally says, what if they don't believe me? David later on is going to say everything God says is true, and Moses is saying, but what if they don't believe me? The Lord, they're going to look at him and say, God didn't appear to you. You're lying to us, Moses. The Lord said, Moses, what's in your hand? Was it like a staff? Yes, Moses, that's right. It's a staff. Lay it down. Just throw it down on the ground. Moses threw it down, and it became a snake. It didn't go anywhere. It just became a snake. And Moses is like, Moses would say, wait. How'd you do that? Are you sure this is what you want me to take to these people who aren't going to believe me? God says, pick it up by the tail. Just grab its tail. Moses grabs its tail. It turns back into a staff. This will take place. The Almighty says, Moses, I will use this as a sign for them. You've been in the desert. You've been away from Egypt for 40 years. They're going to know by your looks that you were nothing but a shepherd. They're going to know by the way you talk, at first, that you were nothing out here in the desert. But when I show them this, they're going to believe that Jehovah, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, has spoken to you. And that was proof enough for them to say, oh, you're right. He did come to you. He did show you. He actually did. How in the world, Moses? And once he gets through explaining all of that and going through, well, you all know the rest of the story, right? People want to see proof, right? People like to see proof of things. Paul offers us this confirmation in Hebrews 11:1. And I'm actually going to use the J.B. Phillips translation because it almost sounds like Webster's definition of science. Now, faith means putting our full confidence in the things we hope for. It means being certain of things we can't see. It was this kind of faith that won their reputation for the saints of old. And it is, after all, only by faith that our minds accept as fact that the whole scheme of time and space was created by God's command, that the world which we can see has come into being through principles which are invisible. When someone speaks, we don't see the words coming out of their mouth, do we? We can see their lips moving, but that's not seeing speech. We can hear the words, but that's not seeing speech. We don't see what's going on. When God spoke and created, you couldn't see what he said, but you saw the results of it. When children are getting ready to cross a crossing, and the crossing guard says, "Stop." You can't, he holds up the sign because you can't see the words coming out of his mouth, right? Mm-hmm. But you can see the sign, you can see his hand, you can see the result because the kids stop or the cars stop, and then he motions others to carry on, right? The words of the Almighty, just because we can't see them, we can't see each other's words either. So as we try to figure out what we should believe, we have this really interesting book called the Bible that you can believe. Because it happens to be inspired by the Almighty himself. He's the one who said, "Moses, you're going to write this down," and he gave him the tools and the information he needed to do it. Moses processed the information, and what we have today is called, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. So that's what's there. Hey, I see Sean's joining us too. Glad to see you.
Hi, Sean.
So as we look at all of these things, as we see all of these things, as we go through these motions of what's happening, just because we can't see what somebody is speaking, we can certainly see the results of that. I'm getting ready next Friday, not tomorrow night, but next week, I'm going to be teaching for Messianic Delaware, and the topic is your spiritual health. Sean just noticed you're wearing camo. I'm surprised he saw you wearing camo.
Incognito.
Incognito. For the folks listening on Spreaker, yeah, she is wearing camouflage dress tonight. So that's the joke there. Sorry you didn't get to see it. Just because we don't get to see what each other's saying, we see the results of it. When I'm looking at spiritual health, you don't always get to see spirit because spirit is spoken. You get to see the results of the manifestation of joy, the manifestation of sadness, the manifestation of an emotion that comes from whatever your spirit has and holds. What your spiritual health is. Now I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to tell you. You're going to have to watch the teaching after next week. Because if I told you now, you'd know. And so would they. And they need to be here to see it. That will be on Zoom, by the way. If you go to messianicdelaware.org, you can watch that on Zoom. The instructions are there. It gives you all the information you need to know just to get to see it. So it will be there. And you get to see lots of us that night because there's typically quite a few people that do that. Hopefully one of these days we will get back to meeting in person. But until then, we're doing it this way. As we interact with people and we understand the things that we do and we go through, we have this concept that we should believe the most popular ideas sometimes. That's not always the thing to do. We also have this concept that of all the thanks, Sean. I appreciate that. Of all the things that are out there, all the theories, all the things that we look at and see and hear and read, not all of them agree with Scripture. Pick out the ones that do. If it doesn't agree with Scripture, I think you're going to be pretty safe if you throw that one away. All right? Just saying. Throw that one away. I think you'll be good. You might not be popular. Okay? The prophets, all but one, were killed. Right? All the prophets died, were killed, were murdered, usually by a king or somebody in power. They didn't like what they had to say. Too bad. Just because it's not a popular theory doesn't mean it doesn't come from the throne room of heaven.
That's it.
Not that everybody that is going to be having an unpopular opinion or not, holds an unpopular belief is a prophet either. So I need to be careful how I say that, right? Because there are people out there who like to change things and twist words. But anyway, I think you understand what I'm saying, right? Okay. We can believe every word that comes directly from our Creator. We know we have the test in Deuteronomy 13 that says if it doesn't agree with Moses, what Moses wrote in the first 5 books, okay? If it doesn't agree with that, it doesn't come from a prophet, and you can throw it away. That being said, there's a lot of false teachers out there today you need to be careful of. There's a lot of people using Scripture in ways that it shouldn't be used. There's a lot of people doing things today that they just shouldn't be doing, because what they're trying to do is promote Scripture to fit their own agenda.
Right.
Scripture is not always going to be what we like. Scripture is not always going to be what we want it to be. And Scripture is not always going to be something we can understand. And that's okay. We need to believe the Bible as our Creator intended for that Bible to be believed, for what He wants it to be used for. We've got to learn to conform to His will, because, well, the biggest reason is He's not going to conform to ours. Okay? If I say, God, I need $10 million in my bank account so I can buy an island in the South Pacific, He's not going to do that.
No.
Unless He really wants me to have it, which I don't think He does, because, I'd have had it by now, I think. So we're safe on that account. Don't have to worry about moving to the South Pacific. But anyway, He's not going to conform to that just because I want it, just because I think He should do it. It's my job to figure out what He wants for me and to do that. And to be quite honest, sometimes it would be really nice if He was a little more forthcoming with some information. Just saying. I bet there's a bunch of people out there with me on that one too. Just you give me a clear path, I'll go down that path. I'll go down the road. Just show me, point it out to me. Need some help here, okay? We can trust Scripture. We can, yeah, Sean, you and I have had that talk before. We look around, we can believe what's in the Bible. It's about the only thing we can believe, because we can't believe the politicians for sure. I don't care which side of the aisle they're on. We can't believe the scientists and the people who have their own theories, because you know what a theory is? A theory is a work in progress. It's not proven one way or another. The Big Bang Theory is just that. It's a theory. It's not been proven. There's no way to prove it because it didn't happen. Just saying. But the reality is, it's a work in progress. And there's all of these strange things that go along with it. And they keep trying to give themselves an out every time they publish something new. But all they have to do is read the Bible, and it'll tell you exactly how it was done, when it was done, what it took to get it done. Mm-hmm. But because that doesn't fit, they're trying to hold the Bible up to their ideas, and it doesn't fit, so they discount it as fictional fantasy. I wouldn't discount Scripture as fictional fantasy, because it is the only thing we can depend on. And once you believe that, then the rest just kind of falls into place. And once it falls into place, life gets so much easier. Kinda. Not that it's supposed to be. It just, big difference between being content and being upset. Being worried and saying, I'm not sure how this is going to happen. I'm not sure how we're going to get through this. Not sure what's going to come of it, but it's going to be all right.
Mm-hmm. That's it.
How often have I said, killing you is not the worst thing the enemy can do to you. Mm-hmm. Okay? If you think dying's the worst thing that Satan can do to you, that's not the worst thing he can do to you. The worst thing he can do to you is convince you to stand in opposition to your Creator.
That's it.
That's the worst thing he can do to you. Don't go there.
Mm-mm.
Just don't go there. We can trust Scripture, not because David said so, not because Samuel said so, not because Isaiah said so, or Jeremiah, or Moses. We can trust Scripture because we can look around and we can study creation and we can see that every word that God said is true. That's the scientific approach that Noah Webster was talking about. Using science to prove God. Not allowing science to be used by the secular scientists to say that it's fictional fantasy. You can trust what's in Scripture. The trick is, if there's a trick, you've got to trust it the way God intended for you to trust it. Not always the way you want to trust it. So, do you have anything else? No? I know you're tired and we have to get going. We have some big plans. So, all that being said, we certainly do appreciate everyone's time.
Yes, we do.
You have no idea what it means to us, the folks who watch it live and listen to it live, the folks who
Thank you, Sean.
will watch and listen later. We appreciate you guys too. Don't forget the like buttons. Don't forget the share buttons. All of that stuff helps immensely, immensely, immensely. We appreciate, love each and every one of you. Thank you
Yes,
for your
we
continued
do.
prayers. Thank you so much for all you do for us. Love you too, Sean.
Love you too.
Everyone have a most blessed week. Please enjoy and trust your Creator. Have a good week, everyone.
Good night.